very much, Stella. Bonjour, tout le monde. Bienvenue à Ottawa. Thanks very much for that great introduction. It's so great to be here at the annual networking conference for the Manning Center for Building Democracy. I want to pay a special tribute to Preston for all the work that he's done throughout the years to build Canada's conservative voice all across Canada. Now, this is not the first time I've been here at this conference, but it is the first time that I'm here up on stage by myself. For those of you that were here last year, I had a bit more company during the debates last year. We had 13, 14 people up on stage, so it's a great honor to be back here this afternoon as leader of Canada's united conservative movement at the federal level. You know, some of you may not know this, but I actually got my start in politics thanks to Preston Manning. He gave me my first job in 1999 as an intern on Parliament Hill. So once again, big round of applause for Preston Manning. You know, it's so good to see every kind of conservative all gathered in one place, all focused on working together. You know, there are obviously different reasons why people join our conservative movement. But I believe that there are some core conservative principles that we can all agree on. Conservatism emphasizes individual and political freedom, free trade, and the universal benefits of a free economy. We also understand the importance of strong families and communities, of patriotism and of tradition. All the different kinds of conservatives come together, recognizing the relationship between freedom and responsibility, of free markets and of service to our community. And we stand against the liberal political philosophy, which supports neither freedom nor responsibility. Which cares neither for the freedom to keep the fruits of your own labor, nor the freedom of conscience or a respect for diversity of beliefs. And that's the context in which we're here today, friends. I want to talk to you about the near future. But first, let me be clear about one thing. We have every reason to be optimistic. I think about where we can be in 2019. And I think about the Premier of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe. And I think about the next Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney. And I think about the next Premier of Ontario being a progressive conservative who also, all three together, will be opposing a federally imposed carbon tax. That is great news for our movement. It's great news for Canadians. And I can assure you that as Prime Minister in 2019, the first act that Canada's Conservatives will do will be to repeal the carbon tax. You know, when I think back to some of the pessimism that was around after our election loss in 2015, we've come so far. There were many in the media that were already saying that Justin Trudeau was guaranteed a second term. Friends, I'm here to tell you that those pundits are wrong. Our goal and our expectation is that in 2019, we will form a conservative government. Now, vous vous demandez peut-être pourquoi je suis si sûr que nous allons former un gouvernement conservateur l'année prochaine. Nous avons le soutien, nous avons le talent, et par-dessus tout, nous avons les bonnes idées. Thanks to the outstanding commitment of our loyal members, we have just had our best fundraising quarter since the 2015 election. For all of 2017, we raised $18.8 million, one-third more than the Liberals. A result that the CBC described as just edging them out. Now, we also have a much larger paid membership. Nearly 260,000 Canadians eager for change now belong to our movement for a better Canada. And Conservatives are seeing that Canadians are responding to our positive vision, and they're literally buying in, and in a big way. Je peux vous dire que je ne pourrais pas être plus fier de notre caucus. Nous demandons des comptes aux libéraux de la bonne façon. We fought them to a standstill. We forced them to reverse much of their mean-spirited, divisive attack and their plan to raise taxes on local businesses. They still have some very terrible news coming in the budget. We haven't convinced them to repeal all of their horrible idea, but thanks to the hard work of Canadians all across the country and Conservative MPs amplifying those voices, we've seen them abandon much of their terrible plan. They had to walk back a lot of it. And you know, during those months, as it became clear that they had made such a big mistake, as they were repealing and promising Canadians that they weren't going to go ahead with some of their measures, it became very clear in Ottawa that the most popular Liberal announcements were when Liberals were announcing that they were repealing their previous announcements. But this whole episode was a window into the soul of this Liberal government, made up of some very wealthy people who themselves like to minimize their own tax exposure, who have the ability to hire the best accountants to set up their operations in numbered companies and things like that. And yet the whole time they seemed desperate to maximize taxes paid by hardworking local business owners, many of whom can't afford the best accountants, in an effort to squeeze every last nickel they could out of them. I'm talking about the Main Street businesses we all rely on, where many of us got our start and our experience. The grocers, the bakeries, the coffee shops where we kickstart our mornings, the hair salons, the farmers, the fishermen, fisher people, sorry. Another word to the list of things you can't say in Justin Trudeau's Canada. But those are the risk takers. Those who are willing to put it all on the line in an effort to try to succeed. And those who create opportunities for everyone else. Des gens comme mon premier boss, qui avait un restaurant. Il m'a aidé à faire mes études. Il m'a beaucoup appris. Et j'ai appris que quand les affaires allaient bien pour mon boss, elles allaient bien pour moi. Les gens comme lui embauchent et forment des gens et leur donnent du travail et de l'expérience. Local business is the backbone and the heart of the Canadian economy. Yet instead of gratitude, the Liberals treat them as tax cheats who use their businesses to avoid paying their fair share. And during this whole episode, when voices from across the country were rising up and working together to push back, I remember seeing a cartoon. Someone tweeted out, it was a farmer driving his combine, talking on his cell phone and saying, "Sorry, I can't talk right now, Mr. Trudeau. I'm just in my tax shelter trying to get the crop off before the fall." But Conservatives understand that the reason why this was so important that we fought back against it was that it wasn't just about the 1.4 million Canadians who own a small business. It was about the millions more who have a job thanks to that hard work and risk. And the trouble with the Liberals is that they just live in a different world. They just live in a completely different world. They've had different experiences and they just don't see the world the way we do. And meanwhile, in a stunningly cruel piece of generational kneecapping, these same people will run up debts for our grandchildren to pay off, even as they pretend to champion the middle class. That is not fair to the next generation of Canadians who will come and be left with the bill. And we saw the depths and the scope of their mean-spiritedness last week when the Prime Minister scolded Canada's veterans, looked a hero in the eye, and had the audacity to say that they were asking for more than the government could give. This Prime Minister looked someone in the eye who was prepared to literally give it all, the whole time spending millions in an Asian infrastructure bank building projects in other countries, $8 million on a hockey rink that you can't even play hockey on, and $10.5 million to a convicted terrorist. That's the priorities of this Liberal government. These are not the priorities of Canadians across the country. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we're up against as a movement. Of course, there are going to be lots of hot issues that we're going to have to speak to and work on. The deficit, NAFTA, holding the Liberals to account for vacations on private islands, and those are all important. But how issues like these get resolved seldom change things forever about the kind of country we live in. What could change Canada and not in a good way, is the deeper struggle going on over the kind of country Canada is going to be. Because I believe that it's not just a contest between the left and the right. It's now a question about being free or unfree. The choice is whether Canada will continue as a free and open country, or whether Canadians will live their lives afraid to say what they think, always looking over their shoulders before they dare to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the government is not the solution to every problem. And we have to examine these things in the context of history. So at 38 years old, some of this history covers the same time period of my own personal story. I was born in 1979, during the tenure of Pierre Trudeau here in Canada, Jimmy Carter in the United States. And in the UK, the Conservatives had just ended a long run of rule by the Labour Party. Margaret Thatcher had only just taken office a couple of weeks before. The Berlin Wall was still standing. Marxists were still openly proud of their Marxism. And in those years, too many Conservatives thought that they were headed for ultimate defeat. In those years, many Conservatives behaved as if their only purpose was just to delay the decline. But the implementation of visionary leaders like Margaret Thatcher's policies on the world stage, and the election of conservative leaders like Ronald Reagan in the US, Brian Mulroney here in Canada, the work the Reform Party did to highlight important issues and bring that movement back to Canada's conservative voice, all believing in bold advance, not managed retreat. These leaders were bold and ambitious in their conservatism, but they also communicated an optimistic, aspirational, conservative message that drew in the support of people who had never thought of themselves as conservatives before. They articulated a clear, principled vision, and people of all races, creeds, and nationalities, regardless of their past political behavior, realized that maybe they were conservatives after all. And there was something else that distinguished the world that I grew up in. It was a world in which the failures of big government intrusion into the economy and into people's lives were on clear display. Canadians, Americans, British people could all see what the leftist utopia looked like. I saw it in the papers and on TV as I grew up, and it helped me become a conservative. I saw the bread lines. I saw the Berlin Wall and people risking their lives trying to escape. I saw that politics has consequences. And I heard a story at the time from an older person who worked in a shipyard here in Canada. And he recalled unloading a shipment of bacon that had been brought in from Poland. And the experience left a searing impression on his mind. You see, as he was unloading it, he realized that it was full of bite marks. But it wasn't from animals. It was from starving people taking a bite out of whatever they could find as they loaded that food to be sent elsewhere. Those are the consequences when governments intrude into people's lives and into the economy. In those years, conservatives in the West unshackled our economy, and they demonstrated the steadfastness and fortitude to sacrifice in the fight for freedom. And they won. And make no mistake, in the ideological conflict, it took conservatives with their commitment to freedom, democracy, and human dignity to win the day. But one thing became clear to me in the 2015 election. We confronted a challenge that I think conservatives were not entirely fully prepared for. What happened is that we suddenly had a political leader in Justin Trudeau who was willing to propose a program in complete defiance of the basic lessons of the recent past. We all heard the phrase that those who do not learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. And in fairness to Justin, we do read that marijuana use does affect your memory, so we have to give him a bit of a pass. We have to re-explain it sometimes. His proposal to run massive deficits, I thought we learned that lesson in the 90s. Appease violent dictators and despotic regimes, thought we learned that lesson too. Suppress free speech to protect people's feelings, I thought we learned that lesson in the 19th century as well. So I want to convey to you that a reality that in the 21st century, it is necessary for us, all of us, everyone here in this room and people across the country, to refight those fights, to convince a new generation of Canadians of those great and intellectual and political fights of the past. Now, it adds another dimension to the next election. Quelle relation les libéraux veulent que les Canadiens aient avec le gouvernement? Allons-nous faire passer les gens avant le gouvernement? Le gouvernement va-t-il appartenir aux Canadiens? Ou le gouvernement va-t-il agir comme si les citoyens n'avaient pas le droit à leur propre opinion? To understand what liberals think, you don't have to listen to what they say, you have to look at what they do. They'll tell you it's all for your own good. The liberals are always so good at wrapping themselves up in the idea that they are full of compassion. But conservatives need to remind Canadians that the liberals have no monopoly on compassion. But real compassion is what conservatives do. You know, we've all heard that saying that if you're not a liberal when you're 20, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, you have no heart, and if you're not a conservative when you're 40, then you have no brain. That's a common expression that's been attributed to others in the past. But that expression has always bothered me, because when we become conservatives, we don't lose our hearts. We still want the world to be a better place, greener, cleaner, more just, more prosperous for men and for women, for people who come here from all around the world to benefit in the prosperity that Canada has to offer, for our children, for other Canadians. Of course we care about the things our opponents claim that only they care about. But conservatives have learned from history just how often attempts to impose virtue by coercion have led to oppression. Our study of history teaches conservatives humility. It teaches us to appreciate how fortunate we are in this great country. And it warns us how quickly that good fortune can be squandered. It teaches us that there must be limits to government's power over the lives of individuals. Not because we've given up on the dream of a better world, but because the lessons of history prove that coercive governments always make things worse. La différence est qu'à un moment, on doit arrêter de parler et agir, sortir et se mettre au travail, accordant ses idées pour un Canada meilleur avec les réalités souvent complexes et difficiles de la vie de tous les jours. Our intentions are important, but sound economic policy is to understand that intentions are not enough. Actions have consequences. With those in the NDP and Liberals, all those on the left, it becomes clear. Ignoring the consequences of their actions will end up hurting exactly those people they intend to help. What's better for a young person than a conservative government always looking at ways to reduce taxation, making it easier to create those opportunities, and give those people experience and a start? And what's worse for a young person, or a new Canadian, or a new entrant into the workforce than a Liberal government always making it harder to create those opportunities, killing those jobs and opportunities, as we see is happening here in Ontario now and across the country. Now, luckily, Conservatives are the great doers of Canadian history. With the benefit of experience, Conservatives know how to build that better world. Over the past 3 decades, extreme poverty has been cut in half around the globe. It's one of the greatest and least publicized developments in human history. It's all thanks to free people being able to make free decisions and the free market creating that prosperity for all those around the world. For Conservatives, this isn't a surprise. We have great faith in the capacity of human genius. The history of the past several decades is a glorious confirmation of what can be achieved when those people are free to build, free to create, free to find innovative solutions to problems without the interference of bureaucrats who think they know better. Now, all of us know that as Conservatives, it's simply not enough to speak about what motivates us, but we have to have a plan to back that up. And in the weeks and months to come, Canada's Conservatives will be putting forward our vision for putting people before government. In fact, since the new year, our team has already put forward a number of items that will make life easier for Canadians and build on these principles. Now, I've got a great group of members of parliament who have a lot of private members' bill, great ideas that are already working their way through parliament. But I want to highlight just 3 of them. I could go on for an hour about all the great things that we've proposed, but I'd run out of time. My colleague Pierre Poliver put forward a private member's bill that supports workers with disabilities that will end what's called the welfare wall, that will end the practice whereby if people on disabilities end up working, they see their benefits clawed back to the point where they lose money by entering into the workforce. That keeps hundreds of thousands of Canadians who otherwise would work, who want to work, trapped in a position where they're not able to do so. That is a true conservative solution, motivated by compassion for people without a big government approach that we always see from the Liberals. Those are the types of policies that get real results. Another colleague of mine, Maxime Bernier, tabled a bill that will shine a light onto corporate welfare and force the government to disclose whether or not companies that have received sweetheart loans have actually paid them back. Protecting taxpayers and showing that sometimes in Ottawa, it's not about what you can produce or how you can provide a service, but it's about who you know. And I want to talk a little bit about my own private member's bill, the Supporting New Parents Act. This new proposal will give new parents up to $4,000 a year to help adjust to life with a new family by making EI and paternity benefits tax-free. When new parents go on that leave, they lose up to 45% of their income. My plan will provide them with a credit for the withholding tax that they receive on those benefits, making life easier in those critical first few months. A Conservative government under my leadership will return Canada to being a principled voice on the world stage. We will stand with our ally and friend Israel. We will stand up for them in the UN. We will stand with the people of Ukraine. We will defend their rights against Russian aggression. And we will fight for the rights and dignity of people everywhere, for the right to be free, to choose their own government, and to express their own opinions. We'll stand with the people of China, of Iran, and of Russia, not with their governments. And all of us here, I suspect, are anxiously watching the increasingly unstable foundation of NAFTA, a conservative marvel that has done so much good for so many millions here in Canada and across North America. C'est un héritage conservateur. Nous sommes le parti du libre-échange. Nous sommes le parti de l'ALENA. Aujourd'hui, nous voyons que notre ordre du jour commercial est en difficulté. L'avenir est incertain. Now, it would seem to many that now would be a time for caution, for incremental gains, maybe just focus on salvaging what little we can. But I say that there's a case to be made for being bold. Nous ne devrions pas oublier nos valeurs de libre-échange, mais les défendre plus que jamais. Nous devons répéter sans cesse que les obstacles commerciaux entre le Canada et ses alliés font plus de mal que de bien. And I believe the first place we should look is to our cousins, our friends and allies across the ocean, who themselves are in a moment of generational change and newfound independence. So I'm here to tell you that Canada's Conservatives, after 2019, will pursue a free trade deal with the United Kingdom when we form government. And I'll be taking the initiative to promote this idea when I travel to the United Kingdom later this spring. Now, it's not enough for Conservatives to criticize. We need to show we have a better idea. Our plans need to be clear. Nous allons profiter des nouvelles circonstances mondiales pour défendre la prospérité que le commerce nous apporte avec d'autres pays qui partagent les rêves de gens libres qui prennent des décisions librement. In the end, that's what Conservatives want for everyone. Freedom and greater opportunity. Freedom in a government that lets the free market work, that keeps taxes and spending under control. opportunity that makes it possible for everyone to get ahead, that doesn't play one type of Canadian off against the other, that doesn't try to drag people down as an excuse when they try to lift people up. The opposite is also true. Freedom dies and opportunities vanish every time so-called experts test their abstract theories on real people. Time and time again, governments who trample on freedom to impose their own ivory tower vision of how the world should be have always led their people to more misery. Et le monde a appris, une fois de plus, une précieuse leçon. Attention aux gouvernements qui aiment le pouvoir, qui veulent contrôler les pensées et les idées. Ils n'aiment pas que les gens montrent qu'ils ne sont pas d'accord avec eux et deviennent pire, pas meilleurs. And they deserve better than what Justin Trudeau is offering. We know it is a privilege to do our duty for our children and our grandchildren, to go out and build for them a better place, to build on a foundation left to us by the generations that came before, and to be proud of our heritage and our history, not to be constantly ashamed and apologizing for it. Un pays qui n'est pas affaibli par la dette et par le lourd contrôle du gouvernement, mais un Canada motivé par l'espoir et renforcé par la liberté. A Canada of hope and opportunity. Now, it's going to take all of us to do this. Each and every one of us has to do our part. We need to re-win those arguments that we won decades ago. All of us, in every walk of life, in every level of government, have to win over a new generation of Canadians. But I know we can do it. Because not only are Conservatives more principled, more compassionate, and harder working, but we have a secret weapon on our side. We are right. So all of us working together can build a Canada that works, a Canada that we love, and one of which we will all be proud for the next generation of Canadians to be able to say, I am Canadian. And I know that working together, all of us in this room and beyond across the country, can achieve that critical first step. That first step that needs to happen for us to start back on the path to prosperity and freedom. All of us working together have to make sure that Justin Trudeau is a one-term Prime Minister. Thanks very much. God bless Canada.
Well, first of all, just thank you. Well, first of all, let me again congratulate you on becoming the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. This is an enormous accomplishment. There's very, very few Canadians who get to that position or get the position of Prime Minister of Canada. And the fact that you're in the running for that and you think you're going to make it is a huge accomplishment.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you very much for coming here. We know you've had a big day. We appreciate the speech that you've given and just appreciate your presence here. And I know that you've had a long day and so have these people, so it won't take long. But we've got a few questions we'd like to ask you and hope that's okay. The first one, as you know, I'm a student of the British parliamentary system and the British Parliament, our Parliament, and the Australian Parliament. I don't know, and there may be people who can correct me on this, I don't know of anybody who's become a leader of a major party who spent as many years as Speaker of that assembly as you have. And so one question I've got is there anything, and the Speaker has to have an ecumenical view, a little bit of the Assembly, has to be familiar with the House rules in a way that many other people don't. Are there lessons from your time as Speaker or experiences that you've gained that are helpful to you now as a leader of a political party in the Parliament?
Absolutely. I don't know of any examples in our parliament, certainly not our parliament or the British Parliament. I'm not sure of Australia, New Zealand, or other Commonwealth countries. There have been speakers who have gone on to become cabinet ministers in previous decades and go back into kind of a partisan role. But I do believe this is a bit of a new experience for a former speaker. But I think what being speaker helped for me, first of all, it gave me an enormous respect and deeper appreciation for our democratic institutions. When you look at what happens in Parliament, it might be odd for someone coming from another planet to look and see what's going on here, these people talking to each other. But invariably, countries that have that type of system do better than countries that don't. So there's something about our democratic institutions that matter. It has a real impact on people's lives, and it's what previous generations of Canadians fought and died for. So that certainly was special for me to be in that role, the person in the chamber that upholds those rights and privileges on behalf of Canadians. But it also gave me a bit of an understanding about where people are coming from in other political parties. I think very firmly that those involved in policy making in the Liberal and NDP are doing things that I fundamentally disagree with. But when you talk to individual MPs, they're getting on the plane, they're sacrificing their time away from their family. Their motivations are good. What they're fighting for, it's terrible and will lead to misery for the next generation of Canadians. But what that helped me do is talking to people outside of politics. Most Canadians are not terribly partisan. They don't. Not too many people carry memberships or see the world in that light. Is this a conservative thing to do, an NDP thing to do, or a Liberal thing to do? And you have to establish that connection on the fundamental motivation. When we talk about policies, I believe Conservatives absolutely always have to put our intentions and our motivations in the window. When we talk about balanced budgets, it can't just be because we like black ink on the ledger. We have to talk about why, what motivates us. I don't want to borrow money from my kids. I don't want to leave my kids with the bill. You wouldn't do that in your life. You wouldn't rack up a lot of spending and leave your kids to pay it. Why do we allow a government to do it? We have to talk about things in that kind of way.
Getting more to the Conservative family, as you know, and it's been a subject here, Conservatives tend to be in silos. We have fiscal Conservatives, we have social Conservatives, we have constitutional Conservatives, democratic Conservatives. And one of the challenges, I think, is to try to get the Conservative family more together. What do you see as the common ground among Conservatives of those different ideological flavors, for example? And how do you build on that common ground?
Well, I believe there is a fundamental thought that unites all the different kinds of Conservatives, and that is a basic principle that there is more to society than just government. And when you look at the left, when you look at the NDP or the Liberals, the provincial or federal level, anytime there's a challenge, anytime there's an issue that people should turn their minds to, the answer is always government. And government's not very good at very much. It can't even deliver the mail properly. And yet,
or build a hockey rink.
Yeah, or build a hockey rink. And yet, we have people who think that it should be the only solution to every issue. And what Conservatives believe, in varying degrees, depending on where a Conservative finds themselves on the spectrum, is that we should look to empower Canadians. We should look to leverage the private sector, the faith-based sector, the volunteer sector, local communities. There are ways that we can leverage that and have that being part of the solution to address whatever issue. Not always departmental officials in Ottawa deciding what's going to work from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland. So I think that's a common principle that unites all the different kinds of Conservatives.
Okay, and that's helpful, of course, as Conservative leader. Uniting the Conservative family is one thing. As Prime Minister, you have an even broader unity challenge. And as you know, this country cannot take its unity for granted. And even among Conservatives, we had a panel here a couple of years ago. We asked Conservatives from each part of the country, what is the distinguishing characteristic of conservatism in your region, not particularly ideologically. And as I recall, some of you were here, the Atlantic person who was a cabinet minister from Nova Scotia said the distinguishing characteristic is tradition in Atlantic Canada. The Quebec fellow said soft nationalism. The Ontario person who was from downtown Toronto said hierarchy and order. Link Byfield from the Prairie said revolution. And the BC fellow said polarization, being at the right end of the pole. Now, all of these people profess to be conservatives, and this was a distinguishing characteristic of conservatism, and this was geographically. So I guess, what do you feel is the common ground among Canadians in those different regions of the country that a Prime Minister of this country has to worry about virtually every day?
Well, I mean, that's a lot to unpack. I actually think that Canadians are more conservative than they may realize. And when you talk to people on individual issues, I experience this all the time. My family's from Mississauga, Ontario, and I've got people in my cousins and aunts and uncles in every walk of life, in every socioeconomic bracket. And when they don't always vote conservative, sometimes they vote liberal or at the provincial or federal level. But when you talk about issues, when you say, do you think that when people leave the country to go fight with ISIS, committing horrible genocidal acts against our own soldiers and allies, when they come back, should they be held accountable for what they've done, or should they be put in poetry and therapy lessons? And they're with us on that. When they work hard, at the end of the day, they want to be able to keep the fruits of that labor. They don't believe that success should be punished, and they understand that they got their start in life thanks to an entrepreneur, not from a government program. When they talk about crime, when they think that repeat offenders who consistently repeat the same crime over and over again at a certain point should be removed from society so that the rest of us can be safe. When you talk about an immigration system that is welcoming and inclusive, that attracts the very best to build Canada and preserve the great traditions that we have, they are conservative on all these issues. But sometimes we have a branding problem that they don't think that they should vote conservative because of whatever reason. So I think a big challenge for us is to talk to them in a way that acknowledges that we have the same purpose, that we want to make life a better place. We're focused on making life more affordable. Our motivations are sincere. We see people in poverty. We see people facing challenges as conservatives. We have that same compassion. We just know that the government simply throwing money at the problem doesn't just not fix it. In most cases, it makes it worse. And so we have to reshift the way that we introduce ourselves and our ideas and our policies, always with that mind of connecting on a human level.
And make conservatism itself the unifying force,
yes,
and beyond just politics. Okay, just
une chose qui, pour les Québécois, le respect pour les compétences provinciales, conservatives are big decentralizers. And this is, I grew up in Ottawa, right beside Quebec. We used to visit Quebec Friday evenings when I was 17, 18 years old. And when I moved out west, I realized that there's such a connection between conservatives in Western Canada and conservatives in Quebec who just want the federal government to respect provincial areas of jurisdiction.
For different reasons, but that's the common ground. Okay, well, just two more questions, and just to key off your speech, you mentioned a number of issues and solutions that Conservatives offer. You made a big point about tax relief and the need to get the spending under control, which Conservatives always seem to get stuck with fixing the fiscal mess after the others. And you mentioned a greater emphasis on freedom of conscience, freedom of choice, and things like that. Is there anything that the movement people can do, which are, many are party members, but are parts of think tanks, training organizations, advocacy groups? Are there particular things that the movement can do to advance those particular issues or conservative solutions that you've put forward? Things that you'd like to ask these people to go away with on their to-do list?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a long list, and I want to. I know I said it in my speech, but what you're doing is so important, and what you've done with the internship program, with articulating that vision, it's so necessary. We are seeing a new cohort of Canadians who have grown up without that backdrop that I did and others did of what life is like in countries where that freedom isn't there. And when you look at the similarities, it's shocking. Justin Trudeau will say all the time, diversity is our strength. And he was even one of his town halls said diversity of thought, people. And yet he's forcing Canadians to sign an attestation of belief to receive funding for summer jobs that may or may not have anything to do with public policy or advocacy work. So what we have to do as a movement is we have to engage on every level. And I think especially with young people. as young people are going through universities, not hearing some of those arguments that our movement was making in the 80s. We might think it's an old chestnut, and everyone knows, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and lower taxes can actually increase revenues because of a growing economy. But I think there are many young Canadians that are just hearing that for the first time, that haven't been convinced of that, maybe have never been exposed to that type of argument. So fighting that fight is key for all of us at every level.
And so the movement role, and in particular
Campus
engaging
club,
younger people,
campus clubs,
whether you're a think tank, whether you're an
media,
advocacy group, whether you're a political party member.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, are there other things as you prepare for an election? I know this is getting more political. I mean, you've got a little bit of time, but there's elections in this year in Ontario, New Brunswick, 2019 in Alberta, and in federally, and in BC. Who knows what's going to happen in BC? Are there any particular things the movement should be doing to assist the party in preparing for the election? More specifically, not maybe on the policy or ideological level, but on the organizational level, on the candidate recruitment level, on the supporting your own activities in the field?
Yeah, well, I mean, winning an election takes a lot. You need volunteers, you need campaigns that are well-staffed, that have done a lot of work pre-writ. You need good policies, you need ideas, you need people who can come with a costed-out proposal and research. We need that. Candidate recruitment, we want people who have that positive enthusiasm for what conservative policies can do for Canadians to join our team and run and win those seats back. So that's all part of it, capacity building. When you look at what was done on the other side, they had a legion of well-funded special interest groups that received a lot of funding, some internationally, who got involved in the last election campaign. We talked to some of our members that lost their seats by very small numbers, and they'll say they had teams coming in from special interest organizations that would drop a bunch of people off to do door-knocking blitzes and pulling people out to vote. We need to start to replicate some of that on our side and make sure that we show up to the fight and we have motivated militant activists.
Well, thank you again, Andrew. And I think we've heard what Andrew's had to say. It's up to us to actually try to deliver this kind of help. But thank you very much again. Every best luck in the next go-around. So, Andrew Scheer.
Thanks so much.